Saints Panthers preview week 1, ladies and gentlemen. It is finally here. The NFL regular season is upon us. Soon, I will be in the Dome watching the New Orleans Saints kick off their 2024 NFL season. We are here today with Pro Football Focus, Tampa Bay Trey, and Carmi or Carmiev, however you say it. And they're going to preview the Panthers-Saints game. We're going to be right there alongside them, previewing this. I'm going to break it down, how I see the game going, and whatnot. So let's go ahead and get right into it.
Carolina Panthers, New Orleans Saints. This one's in New Orleans. Carmen, we know this division very well. These are two teams that aren't at the top of the division, but the Saints are certainly looking to compete this year. We'll see if they can.
Certainly competed last year when we tied for the division. I'm guessing Tampa Bay Trey and Carmi are both Falcons fans. They should know very well how competitive the Saints can be since, again, we tied them for the division, lost on a tiebreaker, and absolutely dog-walked them in Week 17.
What's the matchup that matters for you in this one?
The matchup that matters for me, all right, let me do this first. Here's a situation. Similarly, both teams are coming in with brand new offenses, all right? Canales leaves Tampa, goes to Carolina to try and fix Bryce Young. Bryce Young not only had a bad rookie season, he had what, by all intents and purposes, one of the 3 worst rookie seasons we have ever seen. I believe numerically, the only 2 that were worse was Josh Rosen and David Carr. So his season was worse than Jamarcus Russell's rookie season. However bad you think Russell was, Bryce Young was worse. Okay, so Bryce Young has a long way to go to even being an average NFL quarterback, much less a good NFL quarterback. Canales obviously worked wonders in Tampa with Baker, so the thought is maybe he can do the same in Carolina. Now, defensively, Carolina's got a lot of missing pieces. All right, they got a lot of studs that are not there anymore. Now, this is a super high-level thought line we're going to go down, so I'm going to probably blow your minds if you've never kind of thought about this. So the NFL, there's 2 players in the game that wear a green dot on their helmet. On offense, it's always the quarterback. On defense, it's always, well, mostly it's a middle linebacker. All right, now I didn't originate the idea of tracking green dots. I was listening to my boy RJ Bell in the pregame podcast, and they were kind of talking about green dots and who's a green dot this year versus last year and how it can impact teams. And I thought, well, let me go check the Panthers. And I know the Saints green dot is Demario Davis. The Saints do have a ton of change, but no change defensively. Dennis Allen is still the play caller. Dennis Allen still has the scheme. Demario Davis is still the green dot. Tyrann Mathieu is still there. Marshawn Lattimore is still there. Cam Jordan is still there. Pete Werner is still there. The only real difference is Chase Young and Willie Gay. Carolina has the same defensive coordinator, but, which is kind of shocking because they had the 25th ranked defense on DVOA last year. But they have a new green dot. Okay, I think it's Frankie Louvu was their green dot last year. He's gone. He's not there anymore. Him and Brian Burns are a couple of the many defensive players who are gone. So Carolina has, think about this, new head coach, new offensive play caller, new offensive scheme, and now a new green dot. So a new player who's going to be the main communicator on defense. That is a ton of new. That is a ton of getting in the rhythm and getting things together. You talk about like continuity. That's the opposite of continuity. The only thing that is constant is their defensive coordinator, who was not great last year since they were the 25th ranked defense, and Bryce Young, who was not great last year, who had a bottom 3 rookie quarterback season of all time. So, there is not a lot to like with Carolina, and especially the fact of them going on the road. Now, let's look at the Saints in that matchup. When is the best time for the Saints? I would argue right now. The most advantageous time for the Saints is right now, where no defenses can prepare for this offense. They have never seen it. I can barely prepare for the offense. We have seen very little of the Saints offense. Very, very little of the offense. Certainly it'd be difficult to prepare for what we're going to see. Flip that over. Defensively, the Saints have ton of carryover. We just mentioned it. It's all pretty much carryover. It's a divisional game, right? So now the Saints also have a ton of familiarity with the Carolina Panthers. Now you could argue, well, don't the Panthers have familiarity with the Saints? No, because it's a totally new offense. They've never seen it. Even though they play the Saints twice a year every year, they've never seen this offense. They have no clue what to expect. No clue. And the defensive players who are there to try and expect it, they're brand new. There's a lot of turnover there, right? So I think the Saints have a ton of advantage in just the preparatory side of this. The fact that everything we just explained, the continuity on the Saints defense, all the new pieces on Carolina's side, and even the new pieces on the Saints side is beneficial. The new pieces, because you could argue, well, the Panthers have a new offensive coordinator too, so the Saints can't prepare for them. They can, because that offensive system comes from a divisional opponent. So the Saints have plenty of preparation for Canales and what that offense wants to do. All right, it's a little different than Kubiak, where he wasn't calling plays in San Francisco, number one, but number two, San Francisco not a divisional opponent, so they don't have as much prep time. So all of that leans towards New Orleans having the advantage. Roster-wise, I think obviously the Saints have a huge advantage. Being in the Dome, first game of the year, that's as excited as that place will be. I would argue that it's probably the second most guaranteed game, the first being the Broncos game. Because if the Saints are bad out of the gate, yeah, the Dome field advantage won't be there as much anymore, but they will be absolutely ecstatic, absolutely thrilled, out of their minds this game, which is a difficult place for Bryce Young to go. It's a very difficult place for a new offense to get implemented. You're doing this young quarterback, young head coach, young play caller. How's this going to look? And you got to do it in the middle of the Superdome. So a very difficult setting. So I think all of that points to advantage New Orleans.
Yeah, I'm going Jadeveon Clowney and Derek Carr and trying to disrupt what Derek Carr can do. He's fine against pressure. So he's 13th in adjusted completion rate among quarterbacks with at least 100 pass attempts. So he's 15th in passer rating, 15th in passing grade when facing pressure. So he's very middle of the road, the picture of average. And I think that that's a really good way to make him average and make sure that, he can't get the ball out to his receivers. And Jadeveon Clowney is going to be a big part of that as part of this Panthers defensive line now, which couldn't really muster a whole lot of pressure. Couldn't really muster a whole lot of anything.
Yeah.
As the team was just abysmal last year. So this is the first step in seeing if the Panthers rather have really improved. And it's going to come, like you said, against a division opponent that you should know really well, even at the first game of the season. I think that's kind of the differentiating factor when you have a division opponent in week one. Usually you don't really know what you're going to get, but division matchups are just a little bit more familiar, and there's whatever carryover there is from the year before, you can kind of count on that when you.
Yeah, man, I think I just kind of diffused all that. It is a very easy take to just be like, oh, they're familiar with each other because it's the divisional matchup. But in this situation, this is the most non-familiar the Panthers could possibly be with the Saints as far as defensively and offense. They have nothing to go off of. They can't really take much of what happened last year. I would take almost nothing from last year if I'm Carolina. I'd take very little because yes, the same players, but how are they going to be utilized? I mean, how all of that is relatively brand new. So in the latter part of the season, sure, because then you have games, you can prep, you can watch game tape, you can kind of understand how they're going to operate, but you don't really have much at all. So I don't factor in the familiarity of the divisional opponent much at all here. Now you can factor it in, like I said, for the Panthers offense, because the defense is going to be the exact same. This defense is familiar. So she's directionally right, but she's wrong, right church, wrong pew. The offense will have or the defense will have absolutely no familiarity with the Saints offense. The Panthers offense will have familiarity with the Saints defense. The good news of that is that the Saints defense has a ton of familiarity with, like I said, Canales and the players on the Panthers. So advantage there is Saints. The question is, will the Panthers offense be able to take advantage of having some kind of familiarity with the Saints defense? And I would argue no, because I think their personnel is pretty bad. I think their personnel is, bottom 3-ish teams in the league personnel wise. So I don't think, they could have 30 years of experience facing this defense. I don't think it matters.
You have a division team. Well, you open with a division team.
Yeah, man, Clowney's going to be interesting.
I don't have faith in it. Let's be clear here. I don't know that I have faith in it, but
if Jadeveon Clowney is like the cog that's going to make this defense run, whatever. No offense to Jadeveon Clowney, but all the offense to Jadeveon Clowney, I don't think it's that big of a deal that he's on the field.
We're gonna see.
And that's it's tough because it's not that I don't necessarily have faith in Clowney, but Derek Brown is a stud in the middle, but I don't know how much Derek Brown alone is even a plus factor for Jadeveon Clowney. Who it's not like Jadeveon's been a sack master his whole career. I think that's been a part of criticism against him being the number 1 overall pick, is people wonder why isn't he the sack master, and instead he's just a really great high floor run defender, and he can get after the quarterback as well, but not at the rate maybe people thought that he could. And in Carolina, it's very interesting. I've said this before here on this channel, so if I'm repeating myself to some who are listening, forgive me. But when I was looking up Jadeveon Clowney's sort of fit with Carolina, and what I really was looking up more of how he played well last year and how that could be replicated in Carolina, I found an interesting quote for him when he was in Baltimore last year. And people, and I think it was just an innocent beat reporter question. It's hey, how are you playing so well this season? What's different about you? And
I'll tell you this before he even answers the question: being a part of Baltimore's defense and having Mike McDonald as your defensive coordinator is a huge deal. That is an enormous deal. You arguably have one of the best, certainly one of the best 5 defensive coordinators in the NFL. You are on one of the highest performing defenses for one of the best franchises in the NFL. All of that equals getting the most out of a player. So going from that to the dumpster fire that is Carolina is really bad for Clowney.
And Jadeveon said, I don't really have a lot of pressure on me here. It's a really good defensive line. I feel I come to practice and I just I'm playing free. I just play free. It's not like I have a lot of stress on me, and I'm playing confident. I'm playing free. There's not a lot of pressure on me. That does not exist where he's at. It's the complete opposite. Yeah. Whether you want to look at the money that he was given for his contract, the fact that he is the only one in the edge group who really has any sort of pedigree of getting after the passer at all whatsoever, the fact that it's a homecoming for him, right? He played college ball at South Carolina, which is just over an hour and a half down the road. He's from Rock Hill, South Carolina, which is 45 minutes down the road in Charlotte. This is the prodigal son coming home or whatever. This is all the pressure in the world, it feels like. And I hope he doesn't feel that, but it was just interesting that he sort of attributed that to his success in Baltimore, and that doesn't exist at all.
Yep.
So we'll see, because you're right. I think that he's got to get after it, but specifically, he'll either be going up against a rookie in Talise Fuanga or somebody who has not been able to hold up his end of the bargain when it comes to being a first-round draft pick in Trevor Penning.
But this is another thing that's kind of a misnomer, is this idea of it's edge rusher versus tackle. In today's NFL, it's much more edge rusher versus the scheme. The tackle does matter, but you can see a really good offensive coordinator scheme out a TJ Watt or scheme out a Micah Parsons or scheme out a Max Crosby. It's not just, I guess we got to cross our fingers that our tackle survives. You can get around that. And I expect Clint Kubiak to get around a lot of that this year. We're not going to see the Saints drop back and have the same routes and ask our line to do what we did last year. We're going to be much quicker, much faster. I almost combined quicker and faster into quaster. But we're going to be quicker, we're going to be faster, we're going to be more efficient. There's going to be a lot more misdirection, a lot more play action. Even running the football, we're going to be running the zone runs versus just kind of head down up the middle. Like, all of that is a remedy for the offensive line problem. So it's not just like, well, can Clowney get the best of Penning? Like, that's not the matchup. The matchup is, can Clowney get the best of Kubiak, or can Kubiak find a way to kind of neutralize Jadeveon Clowney? And I have full faith that Clint Kubiak will do that. I'd be absolutely stunned if this game was decided by Derek Carr dropping back, holding the ball, and getting hit by Jadeveon Clowney. I'm not saying Clowney won't have a sack, but I'd be really, really, really surprised if Kubiak let Carr kind of be in a situation to feel that pressure and to get hit. I don't think that'll happen very much at all.
Yeah.
The real matchup, like the real question is, can Bryce Young and this offense be successful against this defense? That's it. Because if they can't, and they go down 10-0, 13-0, 14-0 early, and the Saints kind of are finding their rhythm, the Saints will have to go out there and score 40 points here. They're not playing. They're not playing the Eagles or the Cowboys. All the Saints have to do is kind of find their way, be relatively good on offense. Like, they have to score, obviously. But if they do that and Bryce Young can't find success against this defense, which I have no reason to believe he can find success against this defense, especially on the road, especially in a hostile environment. If Bryce Young struggles and the Saints can get up early and the Saints can dictate the pace of this game, and the Saints can run the football and kind of slow things down, and then Bryce Young is forced to throw because they're trailing. That's exactly what the defense wants. Then obviously Allen is sending different pressures and whatnot, and Young is forced into mistakes, and this very, very good secondary would love for Bryce Young to throw into them all game. That's a great recipe for the Saints. A disaster for the Saints would be if it flips. The Saints can't do anything on offense. The Panthers get either special teams help, defensive help, whatever, and the Panthers can dictate the game. If Bryce Young doesn't have to win the game, if the Panthers can just kind of run the football, play it safe, be efficient, play with a lead, that might be difficult for the Saints. But even in that situation, the Saints are much better built to chase than the Panthers would be to chase the Saints. So this is one of those games I think you see how it's going to play out pretty early on. Pretty early on, you'll know, like, are the Panthers going to have success? Are the Saints going to have success offensively? And then vice versa, what the defenses can do. If Jadeveon Clowney is neutralized early, I would expect that to continue. If you're watching the Saints and they can run the football, you're watching this new kind of zone style work, then that should kind of limit a lot of the questions you have about the offensive line.
I guess it's a good matchup to start out with. I'll flip sides. I'll stay in the trenches. Big trench show here. I'll go Panthers offensive line versus Saints defensive line. The Panthers offensive line, much improved, and it took a lot of money to be much improved, right? They bring in Damian Lewis, they bring in Robert Hunt, Austin Corbett's now starting at center, back healthy. You're hoping that Ike Ekwonu is going to play better. Morgan Moses. Oh my goodness, who is it? Taylor Moton. Thank you. That felt like me saying thank you. That felt like the Quinnen Williams moment when he sneezed and he's like,
"Bless you." He says "bless you" to himself. Yeah.
But anyways, so
you're just thanking your brain for getting there. I knew you were going to get there.
We unfortunately on this show, Carmen, it's going to happen a lot. You're literally going to hear me think about things, and I'll try to make it as a minimum as possible. But Carolina's offensive line should be better this year, if nothing else, but because of some moving pieces and some new guys that they have in.
Well, you also have that. You also have the new pieces, moving pieces of the offensive line. So you had to factor in as well when you're talking about like continuity. Anytime you have new pieces, whether it's coaches, roster, any of that, it's going to show the most early on. Like Atlanta. If there's ever going to be a time where there's going to be some miscommunications or new faces, new places, it's going to be early. So would I be surprised if Atlanta struggled early because either new OC, new head coach, new quarterback, like all of that, two new defensive pieces? Like, no, I wouldn't be surprised at all. Does that mean it's going to continue for the entire year? No, of course not. Just like the Saints. If the Saints started off relatively slow offensively as they kind of figured this out with Kubiak and it's a little bit different because the actual roster is similar, but with some of their moving pieces on the offensive line and Kubiak, no, I wouldn't be shocked at all. I'd be shocked if that continued into week 7 and 8. But in the first half of this game, if you can tell, like, okay, they're kind of trying to feel their way through this, like this is when that's going to happen. So this is when you have to factor in new faces in new places, both roster-wise and with staff.
The Saints defensive line, I'm worried about.
Mm.
Last year, 22nd in pass rush grade, 22nd in pass rush win percentage, 23rd in total pressures.
Yes, I mean, it's a different defensive line. Number one, it's a different defensive line. It's one of those things where you can't just take last year. Cam Jordan was hurt, didn't have Chase Young. A lot of poor performance from guys who are not going to be asked to play much this year, like the Peyton Turners and Isaiah Foskey's and players like that. Just will not have the impetus on them this year. This year, it's going to be Chase Young, it's going to be Carl Granderson, it's going to be Cam Jordan, it's going to be Brian Brzee, and they've looked really, really good in the preseason. I know it's the preseason, but just having Chase Young and a healthy Cam Jordan is huge. So I would take all these numbers and throw them in the trash.
In theory, you could almost look at it as a positive for both sides. The Saints should be saying, we should have the advantage here. The Panthers should be saying, we should have the advantage here. Like, the Panthers probably believe that they are better than that. They're closer to middle of the pack or upper half of the league in offensive line. That's probably what they believe going into the season. They believe they should have the upper hand. The Saints, look at what the Panthers were last year, was not a good offensive line. They should be saying, we should have the upper hand. Which team actually gets it? That is a big-time matchup that I think matters, obviously, because Carolina's offensive line is going to mean a lot towards Bryce playing well, having the time, being a little bit different this year. But who's your plus factor in this game?
Well, on that note, my plus factor is Ike Ekwonu. And
look at the transition.
Look at the transition. Look at the synergy. This wonderful synergy. I mean, Bryce Young was dead last in passing grade when facing pressure. And he faced pressure on 3.5% of his dropbacks, which was the second highest rate in the league last year. So fifth most turnover-worthy plays when facing pressure, took the most sacks in the league, 69 sacks, which is decidedly not nice.
Remember, sacks are a quarterback stat. It's not an offensive line stat. So it's really easy to be like, well, if the offensive line's better, then he won't take as many sacks. But a lot of the time, sacks are because the quarterback's holding onto the ball or not being able to fill the pocket. So it's not as 1+1 as people make it sound.
And Ike Ekwonu himself had a 62.3 pass block grade. He allowed 12 sacks and 53 pressures. That is not what you wanted to see out of this guy that you had such high hopes for drafting him. And they are sticking with him, so they are giving him another chance. And I think that he will be better given the upgrades along the Panthers offensive line, and it won't all be up to him. I mean, it was just a complete disaster as of last year. This year, they will also have run game coordinator from Tampa, Harold Goodwin, and you will have Joe Gilbert as your offensive line coaches. They are great when it comes to pass blocking. The run game we're going to see. It was a little bit unimaginative in Tampa, and I'm a little bit concerned about what that could mean for Carolina and for Bryce Young, who could really use a backfield that he could lean on and a run game that he could lean on. I don't know if that's going to necessarily be the case, but in this game in particular, for all the reasons you just said about the Saints going against the Saints defensive line, you're going to need Ike to step up at that tackle spot. So we'll see.
I think that, it's why I've talked about Jonathan Brooks as sort of like a sleeper fantasy player for this team. Is like whenever he comes back this season,
I was about to say, isn't Brooks hurt?
They will need him. They will lean on him as the guy who was the best running back in college football last year, or at least I should say the best draft eligible running back in college football, because we had some good sophomores as well. But my plus factor, I'm going to stick with the Panthers offense. I think that it's Deontay Johnson. A little bit of a duh here. This one's a little bit more of an easy one to understand, but you go out and you trade for him for a reason, because last year it straight up was not good enough. You draft Xavier Legette when you did, because last year it straight up was not good enough. And they've got some guys who are still in the building from last year, but ultimately I think the top two guys in targets, all due respect to Adam Thielen, should be Legette and Deontay Johnson this year. So Deontay Johnson being able to come out and play well against a pretty good and aggressive secondary. I know it's tougher to do in New Orleans because that place gets lively. And me and you have been there covering Bucs games. I mean, when I keep wanting to call it the Superdome. Is it technically the Superdome? Just the sponsor is different?
It's the Caesars Dome.
This is unbelievable. I mean, Pro Football Focus, this is just what's happened. What's happened in Pro Football Focus? What's going on here? I'm not even totally sure what the hell I'm watching. This has been a shocking 8 minutes and 25 seconds. I'm not gonna lie.
The
Right?
Caesars Dome.
Yeah.
I'm
Caesars Sportsbook Dome.
gonna keep calling it the Superdome. Actually,
I think everybody still calls it the Superdome.
All right. You know, whatever they're calling the dome that New Orleans plays in now, that place gets loud, especially for the first game of the season. They're going to be excited about it. And it's a tough place to play. It's going to be a tough place for the offense to play. But for the passing game, I think they're going to have to lean on Deontay Johnson a lot. So to me, he's going to have to be even more of a wide receiver one than he ever has been in the past. And last year, he had his highest receiving grade of his career in a single season. It was 79.1. So he's going in the right direction, obviously coming off a really good year, but they need an even better year for him this year for the Panthers to stand out and get better and ultimately answer the only question.
Are y'all going to do a score prediction or talk about like the actual game, or are we just going to talk about the Panthers? Like, what's going on? What's the situation here? Have I been clickbaited with this title? What's going on?
Question that matters for the Panthers this season, and that is Bryce Young the guy?
What? They didn't even do a score prediction. They didn't even tell me who's going to win the game. Carolina Panthers versus New Orleans Saints Week 1 preview. They didn't preview nothing. They talked about the Carolina Panthers' new offense. What just happened? Is this like half of the video? I feel like they just talked about the Panthers. Didn't really talk about the Saints. I mean, this is bananas and pajamas. And no prediction of the actual game. I mean, thank God I'm here. Okay, let me try and fix some of this. I think the Saints roll in this game. I think it's very advantageous for the Saints, like I explained. I think it's going to be difficult for the Panthers to find success in this game. Even if the offensive line holds up, do the Panthers have enough weapons offensively to take advantage of that? Can Bryce Young take advantage of if he does get time in the pocket or whatever? I think the game obviously is going to be really hard for Bryce Young to find success in this game. It's just a bad situation all around. It's a bad situation. Him coming on the road, trying to learn brand new offense, trying all the new moving pieces. I mean, you also got to factor in like they're saying, like Deontay Johnson, players like that. Like it does take a minute. We saw it last year with Derek Carr and Chris Olave. It takes a second for a quarterback to find some kind of a regularity with their players around them. This team seems like it's a team that's new in every single space. One of the worst possible places to try and get loose and get used to each other is Week 1 on the road in the Superdome, when the Dome can be rocking, and it will be rocking in Week 1. I guarantee you that. Flip side, Saints are in a good position where the Saints are very familiar with each other. This team went through those growing pains last year. Derek Carr, Chris Olave. We saw a lot of it. Even Derek Carr, Eric McCoy, like all those guys went through it last year. They're very familiar with each other. Defense is, I think, a top 10 defense, maybe a top 5 defense. The continuity there is through the roof, especially, again, against a divisional opponent. The idea that the best part of the Saints team is their defense. And their defense is in one of the most advantageous positions in this game, knowing not only the roster they're facing, familiar with the roster, but familiar with the scheme, because they saw it with Canales in Tampa. So there's not as steep of a learning curve for the Saints defense as there is for the Panthers offense or the Panthers defense. I think the Saints win. I think it'll be a slow-ish game, just because I think the Saints, I could see them starting slow because of all the new pieces like I talked about. And I think Kubiak, and I think this offense is one of those offenses where when you get a lead, you are very happy to run the football. You're very happy to control the clock. You're very happy to just take what the defense gives you. I wouldn't be surprised at all if the Saints got up to a 20-10 type lead and they just destroyed the clock. And it just became one of those things where it was just run after screen after run after efficient pass after efficient pass. And we saw the second half just bleed away. So I'm thinking it's a divisional game, so obviously divisional games are inherently closer. It's always hard to give a divisional opponent a ton of points. This game opened at 6. Panthers were +6, got bet down all the way to 3.5. Saints money came back in. Where we're sitting right now, the Saints are -4. That seems still a little short, but I wouldn't take the Saints -4 here. I don't know if I would necessarily say the Panthers either, but I think the Saints do win the game. I think it's going to be something in the neighborhood of, 21-17, 23-17, something like that. The score may be relatively close at the end, but I think this game will be controlled pretty handily by the Saints. And the Saints, if they stay out, if they don't turn the ball over, it's hard to imagine Carolina doing enough offensively to win this game. So I like the Saints in this one. We'll probably do another preview. I was planning on this being the preview, but with the video, we'll probably do another preview here. So this is just more of this kind of turned into more of like how the Panthers could possibly win the game, but I don't think they can. I think you're asking a lot for the Panthers to go on the road and answer all these questions immediately in a really tough spot for them. Really tough spot. If the Saints had a weaker defense, that's how teams like Carolina win. Is like they beat Atlanta last year because Atlanta has such a bad defense. But Carolina's already up against it roster-wise. They lack a talent basically everywhere. So then when they're also faced with a really tough defense, it's hard for them to find something. Carolina might be able to get some wins this season against teams that are porous defensively, give up big plays, things like that. Also, it helps whenever you face a team that turns the ball over a lot. And I don't see the Saints being a team that will turn the ball over a lot. I mean, even last year we saw Carr was very protective of the ball. I think he ended up with 25 touchdowns and 8 interceptions. So this isn't a team that turns the ball over a lot. They're at home. I think the Saints roster-wise have the advantage. I just don't see a route. I don't see a route for the Panthers to win this game. So I'm going with the Saints. Early score prediction for me would be 23. I'll say 23-17. 23-17 Saints, and that 17 kind of seems high for the Panthers, not going to lie. So 23-17 Saints. Easy win. Let me know in the comments below what you think. Give me your score prediction. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video.